Hello, hello, everybody. Thais Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast. We are officially halfway through the 10 Days of Worth series. Have you been tuning in every day last week for parts 1 through 4? If you haven't, I recommend you checking those out. This is not a series that has to be heard in order, so you are fine starting here. But if you want to learn a little bit more about what this series is all about, go tune into the first 10 minutes or so of episode 100. So we are halfway through this series. I would love to hear how this is resonating with you. I'm getting so many good messages. In fact, I got this amazing email that said, "Hello, Thais. I've been looking for a resource that could help me find my place in the world. The Reclaim podcast was just what I needed. I've been listening to a lot of episodes in the last few days. The 10 Days of Worth and the Reclaiming Worth series are resonating a lot. I think one of these days I'm going to listen to the episodes again and journal about them. Thanks so much for your work." I love that idea. I definitely think that listening to these episodes, journaling, thinking about them, reflecting is the best way that you can make the most out of the 10 Days of Worth series. But yeah, I love messages like that. I love hearing how this is impacting you. So please, please, please let me know. Tag me on Instagram at @IamThaisSky. Send me a private message. Send me an email. I love hearing from you. This is a big week, y'all, because this week doors open for my group program, Worthy Women Rise. In fact, doors open on Wednesday. And I'm really, really excited about this program. In fact, I've spent the past few days going through creating a new sales page. Worthy Women Rise is getting a little facelift, getting a new sales page, getting a new branding, new images. I love it. I'm excited to share it all with you. So stay tuned for that. But one of the things I love about Worthy Women Rise is that, as I was listening and editing to this specific podcast, I was thinking about how much my own insight to knowledge has come since I recorded the 21 Days of Worth series back in 2018. I've learned so much in the past 2 years, particularly around the topics of emotions, of finding a way to belong in our bodies, embodiment, emotions, experiencing life fully, what gets in our way. And so what I love about Worthy Women Rise is that every time I teach a new cohort, I add to the program. I make it even better. I add bonuses. I add so much new content. And once you participate in this group, once you get that content and all of the updates for life. And so what the cool thing is like I get to see the evolution of the program, the evolution of the people and the deepness that they get from this program. Every single cohort I've seen get more and more out of this content because I'm making it better and better every cohort. And so I'm really excited for this spring launch and for the amazing women that are going to be coming into this program for the spring cohort of Worthy Women Rise. If this is piquing your interest, you can go to worthywomenrise.com and learn more. The sales page may not be available yet, again, because it is getting a little bit of a facelift. But if you type in your email address, you will be the first to know when the new website launches, or you may go and the new website may be there. Let's get into this episode. This episode is obviously one of my favorites because we talk about emotions. I love emotions. I'm a very moody person. I have a lot of emotions. I feel it all. And I've learned so much about what it means to really experience our emotions so they stop being so debilitating. And I share some of my thoughts here on this episode with you, including why emotions are overwhelming and what we make negative emotions mean and what they actually mean and what emotions are actually telling us. I also have talked a lot about emotions throughout the podcast. So some of these things may be new and some of these things may not be new. But I love, love, love talking about this. So I'm looking forward to hearing how this goes for you. And then the part 2 of this episode, we're going to be talking about perfectionism. This is something that most women in Worthy Women Rise navigate. I navigate. Perfectionism is a way in which we understand the world that says that if we are not perfect and if we do not do things perfectly, then we are not worthy, right? Then we are somehow bad or broken. And so in this part 2, we're going to talk about why perfectionism can actually be helpful. And a few steps that you can take to begin to release the tentacles of perfectionism from your life. So let's get into it. Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women by women on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thais Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. Today we're going to be talking about emotions and how to navigate feeling into our emotions when we're feeling overwhelmed by our emotions. If you are sensitive or if you consider yourself an empath, odds are you experience a lot of emotions. And this is the majority of the women that I work with. They're sensitive, they're smart, but their emotions can oftentimes get the best of them, and it feels completely debilitating. We completely shut down, and we don't know what to do about it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So first, let's talk about why emotions are overwhelming in the first place. It's not because of the inherent nature of emotions. Emotions in them of themselves are pretty neutral. Even emotions like anger and rage and resentment, they are obviously not neutral. I guess what I'm trying to say is we have certain biases towards negative emotions as emotions that we shouldn't be experiencing. And we're kind of taught that if we are experiencing a negative emotion, like, sadness and depression, and anger, et cetera, then that means that there's something wrong. That means that you're doing something wrong. There's something wrong with the situation. And this needs to be rectified immediately. Okay. Now, this is no surprise that we feel this way about emotions, considering that we reside in a pretty emotionally illiterate culture. Our culture really emphasizes the logic and the intellect versus emotions. And, you can see how this is true in even the smallest things, like when we're asked to make a decision, like a big decision, generally the consensus is make a pros and cons list. Pros and cons lists don't usually account for our emotions, but our emotions make us erratic. Emotions make us unreliable. Emotions, are bad. We should never be driven by emotions. And we see on TV, people that are driven by emotions, they tend to be perceived as unreliable, right? So we can see, like, in the media and in our portrayal of people, emotions are deemed as dangerous. And the emphasis then is on the safety that is our intellect, because if we make our decisions from intellect, then we're going to be okay. Then no matter what happens, like, you'll be able to navigate it. And I just want to point out that that's a bunch of malarkey. There's actually studies that show that the majority of the decisions that we make are based on emotions, whether you know it or not. The majority of the decisions that we make are coming from a place of emotions. So you get to decide. Either you let your emotions run your life unconsciously, or you start to acknowledge, understand, and deepen your understanding and awareness of emotions. Now, emotions is one of my favorite topics in the entire world. I know so much about emotions because I feel everything. I am a very big feeler. And so that's helped me navigate and understand how to deepen our understanding of emotions, because I'm constantly navigating this exact conversation on a quasi-semi-regular basis. So here's the other reason why, we tend to avoid negative emotions. And then we perceive negative emotions to be that there's something bad going on here. When we experienced negative emotions when we were little, we often felt very alone in that experience. If we were crying or sad or, angry, we were generally told that that's not okay. And, we didn't, everyone's childhood experiences differently, but for the most part, our parents don't really know how to navigate emotions. And so if they don't know, and if their parents don't know, and if their parents don't know, then how are we supposed to know? So for the most part, the majority of us grew up into adulthood not really knowing how to navigate these difficult emotions. And so our natural propensity is to want to numb out. right? Can you name at least 5 different ways that we tend to numb out? Because I can. Just look at how, we watch a chick flick and we see how a woman deals with a breakup. It's by eating a pint of ice cream. Like, that's the socially acceptable way of dealing with our sadness and heartbreak. And how is that the case? Like, let's talk about that for a minute. How is it acceptable that consuming a pint of ice cream is a way that we honor how we're feeling, right? To me, it seems to only exacerbate our inability to handle our emotions and our belief that food is a great alternative to actually experiencing our emotions. We are not only taught that, we're encouraged to believe that. And we're encouraged to believe that. Just, again, look at the media. Look at any movie. How do men deal with heartbreak? By alcohol, by going out with his buddies and getting drunk and then sleeping with people. Like, how is that acceptable? So it's time for us to reassess our relationship with emotions. And the thing I want everyone to leave here knowing, at least, out of the many things, is that if you're feeling overwhelmed by your emotions, odds are you're not actually feeling your emotions. Your emotions are all here. You're not actually feeling into them. When we can feel into our emotions, they pass through us. I think it's something like 90 seconds or 2 minutes, and emotion just moves through the body. So if you're experiencing something for longer than that, it's because it's in here. It's because you're perpetuating it. And again, that's not the problem. The problem isn't the length of time that emotion is in your life. The problem is when we are in overwhelm, it's probably because we're in our intellect assessing and analyzing and judging and critiquing and feeling in like deepening our roots into why we should feel our emotion, why that emotion is valid versus actually feeling our emotion. It's really interesting when I start working with a new client and they share, an experience and how they feel about their experience. And I ask them, like, how did that make you feel? It's so interesting to see how the majority of people respond with, well, I feel sadness because this is what she did. And then this is what I did. And then this is what he did. And then this is how I feel. And I feel this way because, of what happened in childhood. And it's like all up here. And I get it. I was there too. This is how we're taught to deal with our emotions. I feel sad, and then we go into the narrative, into the story of why we feel the way we do. And my invitation here is that that's actually not feeling your emotion. And if you're not feeling your emotion, if you're just adding to the narrative of the emotion, it's not going to allow you to actually drop in and understand why the emotion is present. Come from an emotional illiterate culture, and so we don't understand our emotions. And so the predominant narrative that we live by is that our emotions are fickle, they're not to be relied on, and they get in our way. And I just want to invite here that that's actually the opposite of the truth. The truth is, if we want to be whole individuals, if we really want to deepen our understanding of ourselves, it starts with our emotions, because our emotions is deeply connected to our unconscious mind. And that's where our memories are stored. That's where our trauma is stored. That's where our wounding is stored. And so if we want to start to have true autonomy and empowered decision making, it starts by deeply understanding our emotions. One of the things that I like to remember about emotions is that emotions are data, not directions. I heard this somewhere and it landed with me, and now it's everything. Emotions tell us how we're perceiving the situation, not what's actually happening. And there is a big difference there. So if my boyfriend says something or does something that feels like it hurts my feelings, there's a difference between like what he did was hurtful versus I feel hurt by what he did. Because somebody else in my exact same shoes may perceive what he did as not hurtful at all, but as funny. So we want to be aware and conscientious of this difference, because that's what's going to allow us to bring our power back to ourselves. So instead of being like, you hurt me, you shame me, you guilt me, this is your fault, it's all on you, this actually happened because I feel this way. What I invite you to think about is, I feel hurt because I'm perceiving this situation as a situation that is hurting me. And so now I get to look at what's going on here. And that's not to say that that person isn't hurting you, right? That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is we got to look at all of the data and then decide what we're going to do with it instead of just reacting from the data as if it's universal truth. And this is something that I see a lot. We tend to use our emotions as universal truths, as just because I feel slighted, I was slighted. And then we react as if we were slighted. And then that really hurts the relationship. And it hurts our ability because then we're not actually being with our emotion. We're just responding. And again, that's being in here. And we need to change that relationship with our emotions if we are to respond to situations and use our emotions as a power source, which is what I believe that our emotions is. I deeply believe that so many answers to so many of our problem lies in coming into our emotions and feeling our emotions and understanding why those emotions are coming up. This is like 99% of the work I do with my women, with my clients. It's really looking at, okay, you feel this way. Why? What's here? Yeah, we're not straight mirrors. We don't just feel something and then that's it. There's always something underneath. There's a perception there. And we want to be checking into that perception because that perception is telling me what the underlying unconscious belief is. Okay? Let me see if so if our emotions are our power source, if our emotions are deeply connected to our vitality and we are pushing away certain emotions like the negative emotions, like the uncomfortable emotions like anger and resentment, then odds are we're also pushing away our positive emotions. We're also pushing away joy and love and happiness. So if we push anything away, we're pushing all of it away. And so the more that we get to experience the depth of our darker emotions, the more we're going to experience the depth of our happier emotions. And that is so vital. That is everything. So how to navigate feeling overwhelmed by your emotions? First, understand that emotions aren't the problem. Your emotions are not the problem. Feeling overwhelmed by emotions is not the problem. The problem is that we've been taught that this is a problem. The problem is that we are not actually given the tools to actually deepen our understanding of our emotions. And this is something that we get to do something about. Hallelujah. Okay. So if our emotions are a power source, that means we have a responsibility over our power. And if we ignore our emotions, it's going to come and bite us in the butt. And so one of the many things that I've seen manifest from the worthiness wound, this is something that we've been talking about, the worthiness wound. One of the greatest things that I've seen manifest from a deep worthiness wound is emotional disconnect. And the people who feel like they are the most sensitive and that feel the most are actually the ones that tend to be the most emotionally disconnected. For the variety of reasons I shared here, that it's all here. So if we want to really deepen our understanding of, how to navigate the world, the opportunity is to look at our emotions and to start to feel them instead of just be in our heads about our emotion. This is good news because we get to see that if we say that we are overwhelmed by emotions, if we say that we're so sensitive around our emotions, if we say that, we can't handle our emotions, I want these to be a bell in your head that's telling you, actually, I'm not feeling these emotions at all. I'm not actually feeling here. I'm in my head about this. And how do we begin to feel our emotions, right? That's the big question. That's the big question. And my recommendation to begin is to start to really feel into into your positive emotions. Start when you're happy and you're really present, or like you're, excited. I want you to drop into your body and notice how it feels in your body. Like, how does it actually feel to be happy? Like, how do you know that it's happiness that you're feeling? Like, how does it really feel? My chest feels expanded. My heart feels light. My belly feels relaxed. What is it that's really here? How do I feel in my body? Our body is the portal to our emotions. If we can drop into our body, we start to understand why our emotions are the way they are. So come into the body. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? Like, what's coming up? What did I perceive that's making me feel this way? Or that's allowing me to feel this way, I guess is the better way to ask that question, because nothing's making you, right? Get into the heart. How does it feel here? How is it landing here? And I have much more we're going to talk about emotions in the next 11 days, but I just want to open up the door for us to understand that our emotions are potent. They are powerful, and they can really allow us to deepen into our wholeness, to deepen into our fullest self-expression if we can honor them. Okay. And that begins by first honoring the happy emotions, giving space to them, allowing yourself to truly feel the good ones. How often do we deprive ourselves of even feeling the good emotions because we say, this is going to pass, this is fleeting. And so we don't even give ourselves permission to feel it. We know it's fleeting. That's okay. Feel it anyway. Be fully present when you're feeling the good stuff. That's going to help deepen your container for when the feelings of uncomfortable and yucky stuff come up. All right, so I want to wrap this up here. I have a lot more to share about this, and I'm going to continue to talk about this throughout the next 11 days. And this is also something that we're going to deeply explore in my upcoming course, Worthy Women Rise. So if you're like, I need to know more about emotions, stay tuned, because the doors for that opens next week. And it's going to be a really, really incredible experience. This is one of my primary areas of expertise. I know a fuck ton about emotions. This is something that I navigate constantly. And I am finding again and again and again that when we stop making battles with ourselves, when we stop being at war with ourselves, look at this puppy. She wants to go out. Look at this. Look at this little cutie. Look at that. She needs to go out. Okay, I need to wrap it up. When we can be with all of who we are, nothing shakes us from our center. And in that place of centeredness, we can really navigate any challenges that life has to offer us without shutting down and collapsing. And this is something that I think is for many of us, a life karma. It's not something that just happens overnight. We don't just become emotional literate overnight and that's it. We're happy and go lucky. It's just that when we begin to experience the deeper joys and happiness that is here, we're going to start to really want to get deeper into the more challenging emotions, because we're going to see that holds tremendous amount of goodness. Yeah, there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be afraid of. Anything that is happening within you, you have the strength and courage to navigate. I promise. I want to talk about perfectionism and how to release its tentacles in your life. So, perfectionism is one of the main ways that I've seen the worthiness wound manifest in women. And I want to explore that. I want to explore what perfectionism is. I want to explore how we can begin to understand how it's affecting our lives and what we can do to start to release it. Let's talk about perfectionism. Like I said, I've seen perfectionism to be one of the bigger ways that the worthiness wound manifests in our lives. And this is how it typically goes. As children, there's a lot of things that are outside of our control. And if we did not receive secure attachment, and if we did not receive consistent love, it's very easy for us to feel like who we are in the world is unsafe. And so what we tend to do is we tend to find ways that we can control our lives to control the painful bits, right? So if we can control our lives successfully, then we can somehow prevent ourselves from getting hurt. And this defensive mechanism, as we age, can become very debilitating. And maybe you've experienced the debilitating feelings of perfectionism where you can't complete a project, you can't put something out there because it's not perfect. If you don't feel like you're perfect, if you don't feel like you're smart enough, good enough, or got enough education, then you hold yourself back from putting your work out in the world. I mean, there's so many ways that I've seen in my life perfectionism really grip my heart. For me specifically, it's always been about my physical body. Unless my physical body looks perfect, then I don't feel confident wearing that, or I don't feel good wearing or putting on a bathing suit, or I don't feel good running outside without like an oversized t-shirt. I mean, For me personally, that has always been the biggest ways that perfectionism played in my life, is feeling extremely self-conscious of the fact that if I don't appear perfect or in a certain way, then I'm not loved and I'm unsafe. So maybe you can think of the ways that perfectionism has kind of bitten you in the butt and has played out in your life. And what we see is that, on one level, perfectionism, or the desire for things to be perfect and good, is a good thing. On one level, it means that we care. It means that we're wanting to put our best work forward. It means that we're putting intentionality and love and thoughtfulness behind what we're doing and who we're being. So on one level, right, this could be a tremendous strength. It means you're conscientious of the different ways that you could be perceived, that this project could be perceived, and you're thinking about all different angles of the story before you write the story and put it out into the world. So I don't want to say that perfectionism is all bad. In many ways, it drives us to really be intentional and thoughtful around our work. The problem is when we don't recognize that it's coming from a wounded place. The way perfectionism plays out is that it can be very much like a prison of our hearts, and it can keep us feeling debilitated and stuck. And of course, like everything about the worthiness wound, it perpetuates itself. So when you put something out into the world that's not 100% perfect and it gets rejected in some way, then we make it mean that we are unworthy. So it solidifies the worthiness wound. It solidifies the fact that we shouldn't have done the work in the first place. See, I told you that you shouldn't have done that. And it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. And the crux of perfectionism, that what I found to be true, is that underneath perfectionism is really just a desire for us to control our lives. And maybe you've seen different ways that you've attempted to control your life or attempted to control your body. And anytime we try to exert control over our lives, it means that we're deeply afraid. One of the ways that I've seen recently that women are attempting to control their lives is through the conversation of manifestation and the law of attraction. It's if we have perfect thoughts and if we carry this perfect energy, then we will manifest and attract everything that we want. And so, it's just another way that we try to create rigidity and control in our lives, not because we want to manifest that because it sounds great, but because there's a deep place within us that feels so broken and so inadequate and shameful that we use manifestation as a tool so that if we think positively and if we control our thoughts and if we really focus on our high vibes, then nothing bad can happen to us and we can exert some control in our lives, and then we will get our ideal partner and we'll get the money that we want to make, et cetera, et cetera. So while the concept in and of itself of manifestation may or may not be good, I don't know, the way that I've seen it being played out is if we have a wounded space within us, it's so easy for us to look at any tool as a form of control. Even something like meditation can be a form of control and a form of our own prison. And just notice anytime you say like, oh, I should do this, or I should be that, or I should have this, that's an invitation for you to check in with the place within yourself that feels that who you are right now and what you have right now is inadequate. And the problem with exerting control in our lives is that it ultimately doesn't work. What it does work is it helps in pushing away the good, the spontaneity, the surprise, the miracles. When we exert so much control over our lives, we prevent really good things from coming in. And so control is difficult because, we're taught that you don't, control what you can control and let go of what you can't. And this sounds like a great piece of advice, right? Let go of what you can't control. I sometimes have to be reminded of this, like, okay, this is beyond my control. So I get to decide how I'm going to respond to it, but I can't do anything about it. Like, for example, the weather. And so some of that is a good advice, but on the flip side, it doesn't actually then teach us how to navigate things that we can't control. So then what we do is we try to control the uncontrollable. You see that? So it's not just about perfectionism and overcoming perfectionism and overcoming the need to control our lives. It's not just about letting go of what we can't control, but actually beginning to incorporate the tools and the knowing of how to manage and navigate the things we can't control. Like, we can't control other people's behaviors, right? So how can we navigate a relationship, navigate a partnership, navigate any type of relationship, whether it's with your family or friends or partner. How can you navigate it if this is something that you can't control, if you can't control the other person? Yeah. So how do we begin to release the tentacles of perfectionism in our lives? Well, first, I think it's important for us to distinguish between the energy of wanting something to be perfect and good and wanting to give our all, versus it coming from a deeply wounded place of, if it's not perfect, and it means something about me. And so notice that energy, notice the difference. Notice if you can feel that there's two different aspects of yourself that's playing out here. And you may notice that one situation has both, and that's okay. We're just noticing for now. We're just noticing the energy of which we're approaching the project, whether it's self-development, right? Whether it's perfectionism towards ourselves or towards an individual project or whatever. Then the other thing to do is to really ask yourself, like, okay, so this is coming from a wounded place. Yes, okay, so I'm trying to exert control here over something in my life because I want to be safe. What do I want to be safe from? Like, what am I so scared of? What's really here? What's the fear? Odds are that you'll find that the fear is that being who you are is inadequate and not enough. The fear is that that broken place within us is truth. At least that was the fear for me for a very long time. I was so afraid of letting down my guard because I had this feeling that, like, if I truly looked at my brokenness, I was going to realize that that is truly who I am. Like, I am this brokenness. And then that would validate all of my fears. And, I know that that feels very real and it's allowed to feel real, but it's not the truth. The truth is that you are not inherently broken. And so being able to distinguish that, okay, it's not true, but it's how it feels, so it feels real, is a great first step in acknowledging our feelings, acknowledging that this is where we're at, and also separating it from reality, right? So I love to ask this question for myself. Is this really true? And the answer is most likely going to be no, it's not really true, but it feels real. And that's okay. We're not saying that it shouldn't feel real. We're just separating between the truth and what's real. Okay. So when we do that, we're like, okay, so it feels real, but it's not true. Great. So what part of me feels that this is real? What part of me feels like they need to put this defensive mechanism up to protect themselves? And what you'll usually find is that it's your little wounded girl. And she's the one that's usually running the show. And then it's beginning that journey of mothering ourselves and mothering her and developing a new relationship with her. Because her running your life it's chaotic, right? It's not very effective. And it's not very joyful for either you or her. So at the bottom of every belief, really, of control and perfectionism is her. And she's just desperate for your love and attention. She's just desperate to be mothered in a way that she wasn't mothered when she was little. This is actually a really cool psychotherapist technique where we're starting to differentiate between the different parts of ourselves, and we start to question the voice as not just a who we are voice, but actually just a part of us. There are so many different parts of us that are being played out. And the more that we can separate the different voices and understand the voice of the worthiness wound, then we can start to actually do something about it. And next week, I'm going to share even more tips and actual practical things that we can do to navigate the worthiness wound. But for now, I just want to say that being a perfectionist does not have to be a prison. And we've got to start to look at the ways that we try to control and exert control over our lives. Even the good stuff, even stuff like manifestation. Notice if you're using this tool as a way to try to deny the reality of life, like the fact that shit will happen and does happen. And oftentimes when I meet with my clients for the first time and we're talking about, what's been going on in their lives, I find that they are wholly unprepared to navigate difficult experiences because they spent their whole lives creating defensive mechanisms so that bad experiences don't happen. And so when we do that, then we're not setting ourselves up for success. What we want to do is start to create a different internal experience so that when stuff happens, which it will, because this is life and no amount of spiritual work is going to stop shit from happening, right? Then you actually know how to handle it and it won't collapse you. It won't completely extinguish your light. It won't force you into a triggered trauma response. Okay? So those are my thoughts on perfectionism. This is definitely a big one for most of us women. And I know that, when it comes to perfectionism, we have been taught at a very early age to be constantly monitoring how other people perceive us. This is something that we've developed as an attempt to be the good girl and to be loved. We've been indoctrinated by our culture telling us that we have to be constantly keeping an eye on how people respond to us. We have to be quiet. We have to be small. And so it makes complete sense why we develop a defensive mechanism like perfectionism to try to keep us feeling loved and try to support ourselves. And it worked up to a certain point, but if we want to go to the next level, it's not going to work anymore. It prevents us from actually experiencing worthiness. So, when you're in that spiral of perfectionism, I just want you to know that if you choose perfectionism, if you choose to enable the space within you, it's coming at the cost of your worthiness. And that's not to shame you. That's not to judge you. It's just what is. There's a cost to everything. And the cost of perpetuating our defensive mechanism is that we're not going to feel worthy. We're going to perpetuate the worthiness wound. Because anytime that we do not question a manifestation of our wounding, we are just allowing that wound
Thank
to
you
run
for
the
listening
show.
to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thais Sky and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.